actually experiencing life and not hiding from the scary things is like the hardest thing I think I've ever done. Um, but also the thing that, at the end of the day, if you can see it clearly, which is the grace of God, you choose when you want to really lean into life. And so sometimes just talking about the way things feel and what makes things hard, and trying to find language to talk about that kind of strain is like just really one of the most life-giving things for when it comes to forward motion and growth and getting through the sticky injustices of life. And so I was just thinking about how how it's almost like there's deep tension, that I experience and feel, and I'm realizing that in a healthy garden, it seems like certain things carry burdens for one another, and a lot of times, growing pains is learning to understand what's going on when it's happening, and the good pains and the bad pains, and more so than just whether or not it's right for you to be experiencing that pain, which is where I've been hung up so often, because I just don't even want to start the conversation of pain. More so than that, I think there's this invitation to learn what to do with that pain, and where it's healthy to release it, and once released, being encouraged by the benefit that was not only to you but to everything that you sheltered, right? If you can shelter over a burden, and deal with that properly, and others can benefit from it, it's a topic of rejoicing. That's why they say, when a righteous man does well, other people rejoice. There's a lot of reasons why that's true, but that's one of them. And so I am realizing, that the Lord exalts a righteous man into places of honor, and then those places of honor put you into a position of influence over others, I guess. It's kind of what honor does. And then those who are underneath you, when you do well, but you're influencing, and they're benefiting from what you're going through, it's a benefit to everybody who saw. It's a benefit to everybody, And so I like to think that as I've been growing, that and I believe it's the Lord, that those underneath me that I end up loving and deeply caring for, and I feel the burden, bearing one another's burdens, right? I feel the burden of what they're going through, and concerns, and different perspectives, and all this other stuff, and sometimes I carry that in a way that is damaging, and I carry that in a way that is isolating, and I carry that in a way that is resentful, but I'm learning to carry it healthily, right? And so learning what that looks like has been very important for me, and learning what it looks like to have a place of honor in anybody's life. and what it is to steward that well, without insecurity and fear determining your choices, and without allowing things like words of affirmation to be your litmus test of whether or not you're doing well. Not living set up by the fear of man, but by the acknowledgement of God. And so we have these Mondays, which are our Sabbath, because weekends are so busy, and so we've been learning to have Monday be our Sabbath. And so I'm like learning about this, and what I find is that when it's time to really rest, and there's a safe place to rest, that there's this feeling of like blood rushing back into a sleeping leg, or like neurons still twitching in a dead man's body, or like some aftershock being released from the earth after an earthquake. There's this residual tension that was carried. Sometimes, very often, I find, as I'm learning to abide better and better with the Lord, and then that abiding takes the ability, it gives you the ability to release those tensions in stride. But things like fear and insecurity kind of throw out of whack that abiding strength, and then you end up having this sort of residual tension left over, and that residual tension needs to be released. And so I find sometimes when I'm moving toward rest that it feels almost as if I'm moving out of rest, and it feels like I'm pinned between the activity that keeps my mind busy and not tuned into the stresses and the scariness of releasing tension that you deal with in the quiet, right? You get pinned between two places that seem like work. The only problem is on the one side, there's burnout, and on the other side there is, on the other side of releasing that tension, there's rest, right? So if you're pinned between keeping yourself active so that you don't have to feel the quiet where all of your emotions live, on the other side of that is burnout, and then you inevitably have to deal with stuff anyway. You can't get away from that release of tension. So then there's that's the one side. The other side is actually sitting and letting that tension and all those thoughts kind of culminate, and then find a place of reconciliation and release, where then on the other side of that there's rest. But sometimes it looks like, for me, it has looked in the past like panic attacks. It's looked like big earthquakes, like, and then all that tension is getting released, and you're like, okay, I just need to numb out. I need some kind of distraction, or I'm going to tear myself apart. And that's where we need to learn certain tools that come from lordship. That's where we need to learn to follow a voice, to be led, to be dependent, so that way we can honor the one who is leading us in the right release of tension in the right time, and not simply trying to solve all of the problems at once, right? That will result in an earthquake. But letting out several small release rumbles can actually stop an earthquake from happening. And so I feel those rumbles, I feel those aftermath, backlash, shocks, and all that stuff, like, is there actually faith there? Am I actually trusting the Lord there? Like, what's actually going on? And before my mind can find peace again, has to sometimes release that tension. Now, I think there's different wisdom inside of that particular spot of looking at the tension from heaven's perspective versus looking at it from earth's perspective. And I think you're more inclined to have a earthquake if you're looking at it from earth's perspective, and you're less inclined to have an earthquake if you're looking at it from heaven's perspective. But it really just goes back to the lordship issue again. So that's like another beautiful way on the way of that. But yeah, so man, this is a really good cup of coffee. Honduras is legit, you know. Ethiopia is awesome. Uganda, amazing. But Honduras, I don't think it's enough credit for being like always stellar sometimes. Always sometimes. And so, you know, on these Mondays, I have this buildup of tension, and sometimes I have a big backlog, and I think I might be coming out of a season of deep backlog. And also, like, letting go of storylines and forecasts, you know, that have been rewritten and replaced. And it's all just a big act of release and letting go. And the invitation is that if we don't, it's going to get worse. It's very encouraging, isn't it? And so that's good for me to talk about, because, you know, today I feel like that necessity to release tension, and I feel even an escalated sense of urgency because of my conviction of the importance of it, right? So that's almost making it worse in some ways, the fact that I know it's important to do it. And so I am thinking about the things that I wanted to do today, and thinking about other stuff that was added on my plate, and all of a sudden the productivity is starting to, you know, tie in with it all again, and I'm not actually entering into Monday as a place of rest, but as a place of sneaky productivity. And I'm not honoring the importance of rest anymore. I'm now honoring the backlash of feeling like I have a bunch of things to do. That productivity that numbs out the pain, I'm honoring that. And I think it's because it's like procrastination when it comes to dealing with your emotions, maybe. Yeah, so I'm being pulled into the productivity movements as a Monday, I don't know, glass of wine, something that dulls the pain. Instead of actually dealing with it, I'm trying to dull it. Not to say that you can't deal with things once they've been dulled, but that it should just basically continue the virtuous cycle until you deal with the whole, and that less needs to be dealt with because of the little bit of virtuous cycle that began while things were dull. So that way there's a smaller pile of emotions remaining for you to deal with, completely sober-minded and present. And so I try to dull the pain with activity. And so there's a time to dull, I guess. But I think that's really just another issue of lordship. Because I think trust can do the same thing. I think trust can really do the same thing. It's handing off those topics to the Lord and saying, okay, those are yours. And so learning boundaries with God, I think, is important. And the reason I'm saying it like that is back to what we were talking about in France, was learning what he's not giving me. Learning what he wants to be his. So the future and the past are a great, point there. I try to lord over spaces I don't occupy. But he does. And that's exciting that he does. And when you try to lord over a space you don't occupy, you're just anxious for nothing because you can't actually do what you're strategizing to do. And the actions you take aren't nearly capable of reaching so accurately into those spaces. And the more you focus not on the present but on the future or the past, the less accurate you become with the actual thing you're able to affect. And therefore it causes whatever you thought was going to come to be even less likely to come, because your entire basis of extrapolation is variable. So sometimes you need to talk to yourself this way, You gotta remind yourself who's Lord and what you actually are able to do. And when you do, both you and everyone you've been given are blessed by it. And that's a big part of what Sabbath necessitates for me. Maybe what I need to remember today. That I'm okay. We're not about to have a big earthquake. No. I'm able to rest and release all of those timelines, future and past. And just let out a little rumble, a sigh of relief. In the little moment that I occupy. Yeah. It's amazing how much I don't let out a sigh of relief. Worried somebody might hear and be nervous that I was not doing well. Instead, I wait until it's absolutely obvious that I'm not doing well to show them all my cards. You are good. You are a good Lord of my life. Thank you. Thank you for healing me and organizing my brain and searching me and inviting me to live like a lily that is your tender, cared for one. I am the tended of the Lord. I am cared for by the Lord. Like a lily, I get to think of myself in the sense of the sweetness between a lily and the gardener who cares for it. And my family and all. I can think I'm not this Americanized productivity master. I am one of the Lord's special lilies that he cares for and gives what they don't deserve and helps them to abide and to live like heaven was supposed to be, and to live like earth was supposed to be before it is how it's supposed to be, from a place that is how it's supposed to be. And it looks peculiar, like my dad says. We are peculiar people. And I think learning our peculiar way, like Brother Lawrence said, is our Christian profession. Loving God in all things is our peculiar profession as a Christian. That's pretty good, huh? This is a good video journal. This is good. Releasing tension on the Sabbath, I think. All right, bye.